Hey everybody, it's a Manosphere here. I'm doing another video today, and this is kind of a really controversial video to do, of course. Recently, I've been thinking about this label that's been levied at me a couple of times in my life by various people who I'm not going to mention, but and I just wanted to like kind of say that, kind of clear up what I think about this label that has been levied at me, and just see what people think, of course, about it. And that is a label that I've been called a sexist or a misogynist, or, that I believe certain ways about women and men and stuff like that. Now, first of all, I'm going to say that some of my interests are definitely in the camp of like old school gender roles, like because I'm into music and into rock, and there's nothing like that vibe. Which, what the funny thing about this is that it comes from these old blues guys who were living, in pure poverty, and they wrote these songs. They wrote these songs about, they might have talked about the women's ass in a song, or about the woman done me wrong, or whatever, right? So these were traditional gender roles amongst a marginalized group in the first place. So come around these white fucking Karen liberals try to say all this rock is sexist. In ironically, some of them, if they really took a look at themselves, they would actually see a little bit of racism in their little micro minutia of looking at this thing, because they don't understand that this stuff comes from these tropes. There are all these guys that are African American in the in the South that came up with these things, which to their credit is pretty fucking awesome. A lot of it. Uh, so that's one thing. So rock and roll. Okay, so I grew up, wanting to be a rock star, a musician, whatever, and my whole thing was like, I was very conservative socially growing up, and I'll tell you how this came to be. Up until maybe about 15 years ago, I was very socially conservative in a lot of ways. So I had this idea that I, I didn't really believe that, like, I necessarily wouldn't have to go through relationships and stuff before this happened, but like my whole idea was like, I'm gonna get married and I'm gonna have a traditional family and all this stuff, and like casual sex is wrong, and it's exploitative and blah blah blah, all this shit, right? So I got red pilled eventually about that. And what happened was, I was in a couple of relationships, and things went wrong, and things went sour, literally. Like, they would end, and I wouldn't feel the same way about the woman, because oxytocin or whatever, the relationship stages, we went through those stages. Just to quote the band Heat, we went through the stages. um, it happened, and I would stop, I would kind of draw myself out of the situation, and then they would break up with me, or I'd break up with them, or whatever. So this happened, and I realized that I was very naive growing up with these kind of ideologies, like that. One thing is that I see people's hypocrisy, and like, one person might say, oh, we were just casual, or they might have casual encounters, or they might have, all like one night stands, and just say, compartmentalize about that situation, but then criticize other people for having similar situations. And I've noticed that this is women do this more, period. So when I analyze these types of dynamics, of course, if I talk about it, someone will think, oh, you're a sexist, you're a misogynist, because you're only targeting women. Men are already talked about. Men, we already know what men are about. Men are shunned. You have Al Bundy or Homer Simpson. They're the goofball, lazy fucking asshole, right? We already see that. We already see that trope. We don't talk about the other side. It's kind of like Chomsky talking about America and being accused of being a communist because he never talks about the Soviet Union. It's like he lives in the United States. He's going to criticize the United States. And there's enough voices already criticizing the fucking Soviet Union, especially in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s when it was at its heyday with political works. So nobody talks about that. Oh, my battery's running low. Nobody talks about that stuff, so I talk about it. That's one thing. Now, another thing is that I've been into the Manosphere stuff, and the impetus for that was growing up, and this is my opinion, this is how I see things, seeing people, friends, relatives, whatever, get into situations. I'll give you an example. Okay, so I had this friend, he was just crying about this girl like cheating on him, and he would talk about other girls like that he liked, some celebrities or something like that. It's like this girl was not even close to looking like that and close to even personality. What I'm trying to say is like guys and women settle for people well below their own pay grade, not to mention, you know, their own pay grade. I saw that happen so much. So a person might say like, oh my God, why are you like questioning that? Like, I think women, like the way that they think, like with, it's just biological too. I mean, this is controversial as well. They're more like, things just happen, just more flow kind of thing. Like they're more about flow and like feelings, just stereotype, or it could be reality, you know. Maybe Richard Dawkins talked about it, or fucking some of these other evolutionary people, you know. It's more about like, it just happened, right? A man will look at things and be like, well, what steps happened to, they're more logical, right? They're in a certain way, they look at things in a logical sense. The feminine essence looks at it in a more emotional sense, and maybe the essence, I'll just use that, because I'm sure there's honestly, there's probably trans people that actually are so women-like, you know, male to female, that they act like that too. Of course, I believe that, hormones or not. So, and there's people that are just more, you know, they're the more passive part of the relationship that are men, or vice versa. You know, it's just this thing like Ways of the, or The Way of the Superior Man by there's a book called The Way of the Superior Man, and it was they talk about these dynamics and stuff. So David Dida did it. I'm sorry, I was trying to like fake that I didn't remember that, or that I did remember the name, but I do remember the name. It turns out. So we're looking at these dynamics, and we look at these things. So I believe in these dynamics. That's one thing. Okay, that's another thing. That's number two. I believe in masculine and feminine aspects of like society, brain chemistry, hormones, thought processes. That's one thing. So that puts me in the sexist camp too. It's not an overarching rule about everybody that's female or male, or that someone that's like doesn't identify as either. If there are people, I do believe in that. I'm not like the 47 genders Tumblr person, but I'm not like a Matt Walsh necessarily either. You know, maybe I'm kind of somewhere in between. Okay, I'm trying to say this. So the thing is about the reason why people might think I'm sexist is because I believe that, and I still do believe in this to some extent, even if I may not follow it in the future. I have violated my own values myself in the recent past, honestly. Like, people who watch this video, certain people will know what I'm talking about, that I'll say I'll do this and I don't, you know, I'll say I'll never do this, I'll never date someone like this, blah, blah, blah. Or I'll never get in this type of situation. I'll violate it. I'm just going to say I'm a hypocrite. So ideally though, I believe that attraction can be a process that you can learn. And that's very sexist to a lot of people. I mean, You think about, because let's say the feminine essence, the feminine aspects of a person believe things are just kind of happenstance, and like you can improve these things, but it's like the attraction just naturally happens. There's no, you don't have to analyze it from this logistical point of view. And the other side is like, if you analyze that, you're a misogynist because you're thinking this and that, blah, 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 about the woman or whatever. So, of course, and that's the whole pickup artist thing. Basically, that sums up the whole pickup artist thing. It's like thinking that you can improve yourself and you can choice. You can choose to some extent. Obviously, you can't 100%. Obviously, there's a spectrum of this. You can choose to some extent who you're with, because you improve yourself to attract what you want enough in certain ways. You learn how to talk better. It improves it all around you, of course, in life when you do these types of self-improvement things. Of course, it could backfire and turn you into a sociopath, like fucking some of the RSD guys, the real social dynamics. I truly believe like there's something wrong with some of those guys sometimes. There's some of them I like, some of them I don't. But just talking to someone about that last night. So certain ones that maybe from the forum originally. I'm not talking about the guru. Well, you know, some of those guys just seem a little off, right? I'm not saying anyone in particular, but so when you look at these things, if you want to look at it as, okay, I'm saying this, I believe in this about men and women, I believe in this. So a person would say, oh, well, you believe in this superficial thing. No, it's not about that. It's about, one of my girlfriends was so fucking mentally ill that she thought I was going to kill her dog if I was alone with her, or alone with a dog. Why would I want to settle for that? You know, one of my girlfriends was so mentally ill, she fucking like, you know, pulled all this shit. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm bad. I'm the bad guy for wanting to improve on who I date. And we'll talk about looks. Men are fucking visual. It's just a fact. Brain chemistry, neurology, the sciences have fucking settled this subject. Regardless of what you trot out on Daily Beast or fucking Vox or BuzzFeed about some fucking feminist professor saying it could be wrong because of this data was, you know, used or whatever on this one situation, even though there's 20 other studies, you know, the fucking type of article. Men are more visual. Men are primarily, or cisgendered heterosexual men are primarily, why they're attracted to younger women is because of procreational, you know, like something in our DNA. It's like, oh, well, they're more fertile, right? Because, you know, they're younger, they're more fertile. It's just part of our fucking life, you know, that happens. So that's why men are attracted to younger women, and women are attracted to older men because they can provide the baby, you know, and protect them from the predator, the apex predators out there or whatever. So this is just, I believe in these things on some level. So of course that puts me in the misogynist camp. I don't believe everybody has to subscribe to gender roles and stuff like that. I don't give a fuck about that. Now, that said, when someone is actively letting themselves be in a certain role, even when they shouldn't have to be, that is where I have a problem with. If a person just says, if it's just more passive and they're a man in a relationship, blah, 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 whatever. But if they're actually letting themselves get abused, or, you know, if not letting themselves, but if they're actually getting abused, there's a problem. There's a problem. There's something going on with them, you know. Maybe they're on the spectrum. Maybe they're just fucking, you know, whatever. They have social anxiety, you know, even with their girlfriend or whatever, or wife. Maybe they're fucked up or something. But, or the other way around, you know. I believe in equity. You know, I'm about equity. I'm not about, you have to be the same. You have to be this homogenous, androgynous thing for equality. You know, I don't believe in that. You can be whatever the fuck you want. You can have the type of relationship you want. You can go after what you want. That's what I believe. I believe in choice. Number one, choice. above everything, choice. That's what I believe in. It's a very libertarian concept. A lot of people are threatened by choice. A lot of people are threatened by that. So, and people call me a misogynist or imply I'm a sexist. They don't really understand my mentality about why I. I mean, I'll give them the fucking, I'll say maybe you're right. Maybe I have some problematic opinions about these things according to society, our current zeitgeist. Maybe I do, but it's not without reason. It's not without scientific backing. Maybe it's problematic to believe these things. I just know that I believe that people should be equitable as far as, how they see things. And, it's like for my own life, am I, as far as my dating choices and as far as what I'm looking to do, part of it has been about developing the skills. This is the whole pickup artist thing. This is why it's so problematic to people, is that people talk about the skills that they want to get. And you could say, oh, you're faking it, you're being a fake person and trying to be a player, blah blah blah. It's not really about that. It's about turning yourself into a person, because I believe in NLP and a lot of the stuff about, a change. Like, I don't believe a person, like, talk about blank slate earlier, but I do believe people can change enough to become more of what they want to be and get into the types of relationships they want. Now, whether or not that's, throwaway, use relationship, use people or whatever. That's the whole problem, though, is like when a person says someone's sexist because they believe a person should not have casual sex with a bunch of different people, or there's something wrong with them if they do. The problem, and they call them sexist for believing that. There's no culpability on the other side. Like, oh well, what about the woman that was I mean, women can sniff things. This is another maybe misogynist thing to say, but a lot of times women have a lot of good intuition. They can sniff when a guy's a player or not. A lot of times, or they could say he's possibly a player, so they can know before they get themselves in a situation. I'm not saying that it's all of them are like that, but it's like, where's the culpability of the other party in any of these situations? So, am I a sexist? I don't know. I like a lot of old sexist rock lyrics that are derived a long time ago from old blues guys, because that's who that's who came up with those concepts. And actually, there was this one song, the song Rolling Stones did, "Start Me Up," that had a lyric, "You make a dead man come." I think it was actually a woman that originally sang the blues song that had that line in it. It's kind of funny. Or "I can make a dead man come" or something. It's pretty funny, actually. Look it up. It's actually a pretty cool song. So, and I have raunchy sense of humor. I have a raunchy sense of humor. I have a raunchy way of thinking of things. I mean, it could be because people were giving me porn at a young age, maybe when they shouldn't have, or they were making jokes, whatever. I mean, it's not like I sit here and say like, oh, I think women should be barefoot in the kitchen or something. I just have like a different way of thinking of relationships and stuff. And I don't think of like, I do think like most guys that have healthy relationships are one of two types of people. I think I'm talking about men. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm talking about men. I'm mansplaining. Yeah. I think the type of guys that have healthy relationships are, one, they get really lucky early on and they get into like a very healthy attachment style, or healthy attachment styles relationship. I'm talking about hetero-cis relationships, by the way. They get into that really early because they're a high school sweetheart or college sweetheart or whatever. The second type, I think, of what I see is that a guy will go through a process of you know, various relationships, you know, some very casual, some very short lived, if, you know, really a relationship at all, one night stands or one day stands or whatever, you know, friends with benefits, fuck buddies, you know, girlfriends, you know, whatever. And then they mature. I've seen this happen many times. Friends, I mean, actually, most of my friends that I know that are married, honestly, like they went through this, or they got, or some of them are divorced now, but you know, like people that I've seen coming up, they go through this process as a young person. I've talked about this in a previous video. You know, they'll have their first date, you know, in middle school. They might make out or whatever, and they might do a little more than that. Who knows? They go to some, uh, you know, junior high school dance, you know, or whatever. Then they're in high school. They fool around even more, lose their virginity, and have this, you know, string of girlfriends or whatever, two or three or whatever. I think that's pretty average, you know. And then college, they fuck around a lot because that's kind of the time to do that. Get drunk in early college and stuff, and you know, have like a string of various drunken problematic encounters, even though both parties are drunk. What do you say about that? Anyways, I'm not going to go into that. I'm just saying, like, whatever, casual encounters, drunk or not. Okay, I'm just going to say that because I dated someone much younger a while back, before my ex-girlfriend who was, I mean, much younger for the time, I should say. Like, she was actually early 20s, and she had gone through a lot of this, like just gone, you know, done all this stuff and talked about it with me and stuff. And it's like, of course, being the sheltered, naive guy I am, I was kind of in shock about some of it, but you know, it is what it is. So the at the time, I'm saying, like, I was sheltered and naive. They go through this process, okay, and then, you know, in college they'll meet someone and they'll probably be in a long-term relationship, and then finally, either in college or after college, they get married, have children. Probably don't live happily ever after, because with the divorce rate as it is, but it'll be a super long relationship. And sometimes they do live happily ever after, because I've known people that have done this, so, or are still married to their wife, you know. So this is the normal guy's process. In my opinion, that's the norm. Okay, what I'm talking about. This is normal. This is what I see as normal. Now, some people might complain and think it's not normal. This is just what I see as normal, average. Like, of course, there's a lot of different permutations of this and stuff like that, but this is what I see as normal. Most guys, I think, have some type of permutation of this type of process. Now, with me, it was an absolute fucking travesty. It was an absolute tragedy. It was an absolute fucking, like, disaster. I mean, I had my chances growing up to break out of that whole thing. I felt sorry for myself. I was depressed. I thought I was a piece of shit. I thought, you know, I was a loser. I was, you know, and I hated myself, and bluntly, growing up and as a teenager, even though I had chances right in front of me to lose my virginity or to, you know, get into certain situations. And then I was humiliated early on with the first girl I dated in high school by this other guy that was like pretending to be her online and fucking with my self-esteem, made me want to kill myself and stuff. All this stuff happened for real. This is true story. And so all this stuff happened, and I was feeling like shit. I had my chances. You know, this girl, when I worked at the a Walgreens, lived above there, and I thought, and this is when I still had this idealistic, like, sort of pseudo-Christian thing going on. Like, I had a dream she was my wife, and all this stuff, and all this weird shit happened, and it was like a totally humiliating experience, of course. And then, you know, finally, years later, I finally get a girlfriend because I was set up with her by a relative. You know, it's like, and by that age, a lot of people were starting to get, I mean, they weren't, some of them were getting married, especially as time went on. Those were the earliest ones were starting to get married, especially if you lived in, like, bumfuck Wisconsin, not in the major cities, but they were getting into relationships, getting married, I mean, it happened, slowly but surely, their first marriage or whatever. So meanwhile, I'm fucking with my dick in the wind, just like, trying to see where the hell I was going to go. And I was depressed and all these medications and shit, or not all these medications, just one medication, but totally like lost. And I gained like even more weight than I'm at now. And then, that's what happened to me. And so for someone to say like, oh, I'm a sexist because like I say this comment, or, like, I mean, I don't think they really understand like what I believe in. I believe that process is normal, what I just described. I didn't get to go through that process. I didn't get to do all that stuff. I didn't have like, this like college frat, like sorority party where I was with this girl and then we had the walk of shame the next day or whatever. I had to hook up in college or whatever that. I never fucking experienced any of that shit. I never had a minute of that. All I had were these awkward situations, which didn't usually involve anything happening with down below the pants, I mean, or below the waist, I should say, and that's what I grew up with, and that's what I came up with in my 20s, at least part of a lot of my 20s. So when someone calls me a sexist or a misogynist, they've got to understand I'm coming from this, background of anxiety, fear, depression, darkness, and suicidal ideation at times. I'm just going to be plain honest about it. I mean, it's like, it really sucked. I mean, back then, I'm not talking about now. I'm just saying back then, back in the past, that was a big part of my existence. So I thought, and one time I was misogynist. I like hated women. I hate women, I hate bitches, whatever, all this stuff. Like I was pretty sexist at that time, but I really don't consider myself, now that I'm reviewing all this, I don't really consider myself a misogynist. Now, do I believe there are differences between men and women? Great chemistry wise, cisgendered, normal, quote unquote, men and women. Yeah. I believe they think differently. I believe there's different things about them. I believe even to the extent where I think like, people that don't identify as either gender probably think like the other gender is supposed to think. Like I said before, I do believe in that. I don't make any bones about it. And do I believe that someone can go through this process later in life that I talked about with these guys? Can they go through this process where they learn how to, they learn what they never learned, which should come naturally to them a lot of the time on some level, okay, in some level, right? It comes naturally to most people that get into, I see people I see people on my Facebook who are celebrating their son or daughter's graduation from high school. And I haven't even been fucking married ever, It's like, you see that and you're like, and people want to fucking complain about me being sexist or not, talking about like me being myself, like by reading reading books about how to be more attractive or watching videos or attending way overpriced boot camps. If people want to complain about that shit, go right ahead. But you have to face that this reality has not been ideal for me, this part of my life, and understand that this is not what I wanted. Now, there is that part of me, like I said, I love the idea of just like being a rock star and getting groupies and all that stuff. I fucking, I think it's awesome. Like, and there's culpability there because, a guy is, I mean, they do seek them out, but they raise their hand. Like the roadie would say, who wants to come backstage? I mean, the girl knows what's going on. That's why you haven't had a lot of Me Too with rock stars. You've had hardly anything with that. Like, nobody's coming out and saying, I mean, not Nikki Sixx is a bad example because of that, the dirt thing with which happened. But, like, nobody's coming out and saying David Lee Roth, like, raped me and all this stuff. I mean, they just, because there was culpability, they actually had culpability because they did that shit. And they admitted it and didn't give a fuck, because that was the way. There was consent in those situations. That's what I'm trying to say. So me idealizing these rock stars with the groupies and stuff, I'm just like, that would be a great fucking life for, you know, a couple of years. I still believe that. I don't care, you know. Oh, you have to have a relationship all the time. You have to be serious, blah 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 blah, or else it's like exploitative. Well, who's exploiting who, you know? So I don't know. I don't fucking know, you know. I don't know what to say, but that's kind of a background of why, even if people call me sexist or misogynist, because I have these beliefs, because I have this image, of this idea that of what most people were supposed to do, and that I should do some of that. I should have this later in life. I should try to get better at this subject. And a lot of that times that does involve younger women, because I'm old as fuck. Like I said, people graduating from high school, how am I going to relate to that? Oh, my son graduated high school. Oh, yeah, my son does too. Let's have a date. Yeah, I'm not going to relate to that. I relate to people that are going to concerts. And how old are they? You know? So that's pretty much all about this subject. I just thought I'd say that because I was kind of accused of that the other day by someone of being a sexist. And like, I don't really, and you know, I do think like there's a certain culpability with men and women, and like the idea that I don't want to judge people anymore as far as the relationship goes, but it's like sometimes you wonder why someone's with the other person. And especially in a situation where you know that they are saying other things, like they're saying, that's my favorite actress. She's so hot. And the woman is like, okay, on the rating scale, she's a full, like she's a -2 or 4 or whatever. But yet they, you know, the guys, you know, says he loves her and stuff. It's like, do you really? If you're talking about all these, I mean, say, especially if they talk about it a lot. Okay, I'm not saying if one like passing comment about some, you know, some redheaded wet wrestler or whatever, like that you liked or whatever, like even though your wife looks nothing like that, is like whatever, you know, is, or whatever situation, she's like in a wheelchair and like deformed or something, but you're like, oh, I really love her. It's like there's desperation in situations. People settle. Everybody settles to some extent. Remember this. Everybody settles to some extent. You're never going to have your ideal partner, but I've seen it in my life where people are when, especially if they're in a fucking situation where they're at each other's throats, like the Amber Heard, you know, fucking Johnny Depp thing in a certain way, like where they're at each other's throats all the time. That's beyond settling. That's like totally fucking your life up, shooting yourself in the foot. Let me ask you, I'm going to leave it to this. Let me ask my viewers a question about this. So, what would you rather have? A guy who is a player or pickup artist, not a player necessarily, maybe he's honest with the women to some extent. On some level, he's honest with her. They know what they're getting into. He has sex with a lot of different women. Some of them do like him and want to, you know, tie him down, blah, blah, blah. Would you rather have that? Or what's a more ethical way of living life? That, or like getting into these strain of relationships that are abusive and like they're serious. Oh, they're committed. Oh, they're probably more Christian. But, you know, they're shit because they're abusive and they're just like have this terrible toxicity to them. Well, what's more moral? I don't know. It's a conundrum, isn't it? Because at least if the guy is honest, that's the player, who cares? You know? Obviously feelings are going to get hurt, and that's something to think about, but it's like it's less in a certain way. It's like, at least if the woman knows, and that's the problem that comes into these situations, of course, that's why it's problematic, is like the other person doesn't think the same way about the situation. They want something more. They don't like being used, even though they kind of use the guy too. So there is culpability in these situations. So I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to get better with relationships or meeting people. And sometimes that does involve things that people might not find normal to the situation. If you grew up and people tell me, oh, you'll meet someone online, or oh, you'll meet someone when you stop looking, you know, they say all that shit, and I'm just like, at this point, it doesn't faze me, because I'm like, okay, you mean well, your intentions are good, but you're full of shit, because I've never met anybody without like trying, for one. Never. I've never just sat on my ass and met someone. And so I'm going to go into this situation actually in my next video. But anyways, that was a reply to Am I a Sexist?